I don't know how to live life on life's terms, like on my own. Like that was a very hard pill to swallow. But as soon as I swallowed that pill, I started to feel better. It's like, I need to take my medicine.
There you go.
And the medicine is, Delvin, you don't know how to run your own life,
Mhm.
but it's okay. But there are some people who can actually walk with you and help you,
Yeah.
and point things out that you can't see, and I have a design for living today, and it's not perfect. I make mistakes. I, still do certain things that I don't, feel good about, like hurt people, right?
Sure.
Unintentionally. And it's just things that I have to continuously work on and go back to what we talked about, that structure in the morning. It's like that structure is so important to me because I need to start utilizing my awareness on when these things starts cropping up a little bit, more so than just like, let's just see what happens type feel.
Hello, I am B. Reeves with New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to our weekly podcast, Finding New Waters. Our goal in creating Finding New Waters is to provide a resource for families to help navigate the complexities of supporting a loved one struggling with substance use or mental health. When we find ourselves in crisis due to one of these issues, most people have no idea where to turn. We hope to shed some light onto what is often the darkest hour for many families. Thank you. All right. Good morning. My name is B. Reeves. I'm the Director of Business Development at New Waters Recovery with my CEO, Justin McClendon, and our very special guest today, my buddy, Delvin Kenion, who is the Program Director at Abaya Wellness in Durham, but also wears many hats in addition to being a therapist. So welcome, Delvin.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity for being here.
Thanks for being on. Man. It's good to have you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so Delvin, I met Delvin 3.5, 4 years ago, something like that, maybe a little bit less. But he and I worked together at another company in this field. And I wanted him on here. I saw him the other day in person, asked him to be on the podcast. But every few years, I meet somebody who just has really good energy and makes me just feel at ease. And not to put too much pressure on you, but you're one of those people.
Not really.
I'm serious.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a it's been a journey for me, and I think a long time ago, like my biggest uh, protector was more of anger and
Mm.
wanting to protect myself in so many different ways. So being on the journey, I've really tried to focus more on being more at ease and serene and just finding a peace of mind. But that's that's not stating that I still don't have that go to, because I'm human. So but it just feels a little bit more comfortable when I'm like much more in a humble state. So just really trying to pretty much put that vibe out is like my objective on a continuous basis. So
Yeah.
it's probably what you're
Yeah. Well, how do
experiencing.
you get to this state of peace?
I don't know. That's I actually really thrive off structure. And so, when I wake up in the morning, it's almost like this negative mind space of or mindset of, it's morning time. You got to do this. So really, it's like I've created this structure in the morning to get out of that type of mindset. And it feels really, really good, especially when I implement it, like working out and things like that in my life, because mind, body, and spirit is like the things that I have to focus on
Mm.
to get into this place of getting outside of me. Like, and then I can start producing like this energy back out into the world. So that's what I hate to say it, is almost like I'm addicted to that. It's like this really good, this feeling. And the perception shift that I've experienced by doing so too is just something I really like to hold on to and just, put it back out into the universe like I've mentioned before. And so I just love being optimistic. I love being happy. And it's like,
That's
I
awesome.
love putting smile on people's faces. And it's like when I'm like very grounded, oh my goodness, it's like I'm like a little class clown. So
That's great. That's good stuff. So I know, as B mentioned, I think you wear a lot of hats,
Mhm.
as you've said, at Abaya. I'm pronouncing that right, Abaya.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, what goes on over there?
Yeah. I
What do you
mean,
do over there?
Oh man, to be truly honest with you, it's like Abaya is a special place. Like I didn't even expect to be a part of it, and that's just how things have worked out for me. But Matt O'Connor, the founder, um, really good guy. We crossed paths, and just all of a sudden we ended up like talking and more importantly about the mindfulness based stuff.
Mm,
Like that was something that I had not implemented in my life, and we just talked about it. We talked about the type of programming, whether we're gonna split, the
mhm,
clientele from gender, and based on best practice, it's just better to split, from a gender's perspective. But like I don't know, implementing mindfulness has been really like
mhm,
a life changer for me. Um, But like what we do is a gender specific, mindfulness based intensive outpatient relapse prevention program that, really has a holistic approach. So they're going to be introduced to many types of, modalities to allow them to choose what actually works for them. And so it's more person centered. We meet the client with where they're at. I really like the wraparound services outside of just regular group therapy and individual therapy. Like we actually assign them to a wellness slash recovery coach. And we also do individual for supporter or their loved one. And then over time, we'll put them in front of a licensed marriage counselor,
okay,
so they can actually start focusing on the family dynamics of it. So from equine therapy to yoga to just art, different types of activities. It's just pretty cool. It's a
that's
pretty
awesome.
cool place. I mean, but last thing I'll share is like I like to get people over to the place because me communicating with you on what the experience is
Mhm,
totally different compared to the feel you get when you walk in the door. It's just like it's a safe, sacred type
mhm,
place. And so ultimately, like that's how I feel every day when I walk through the doors.
that's great.
Yeah.
I hear you. We feel the same way, and getting somebody to come see us is so important. And for me, before I found myself in a detox, if I ever heard the word detox, I mean, I had
Mm.
this image of being handcuffed to a radiator and told to sweat for a week. I don't know where that came from, but that's what I thought. And then when people come to see us, not that they have that exact image, people, their fears are alleviated. I don't think people have fears about Abaya, but it's still important to go see because
Mhm.
still treatment's scary no matter
Right.
what, even if
Yeah,
people have been before, if they're coming from residential and, in the industry, we say stepping down
Right.
where they know that they're going to have more quote unquote freedom. It's still important to go get a look at the defense, as it were.
Yeah.
mhm,
You said a few words in your description of Abaya that maybe would be helpful to be explained to our listeners and our audience, just because I know I'm very guilty of speaking kind of treatment ease and
Mhm.
expecting everybody to understand what I'm talking about. But sometimes I need to remember that not everybody knows what mindfulness is, or in our case, um, a bridge program. I mean, whatever it is,
Right.
I just assume that everybody speaks my little niche language that I
Mhm.
speak, with people like you and
Right.
people like Justin all day. So what will you explain what is mindfulness?
Imma really simplify it, like awareness.
mm,
If it's just being aware of your body, and how it's functioning right at that moment. Like if I could just sum it up, it's just like having the awareness of how you function as a human being, and the more you get to understand your makeup and utilizing awareness, because you'll understand where certain things are coming from or what's triggered you or how you really like to navigate through certain things because of this one feeling or this deep rooted emotion or this fleeting thought that comes up out of nowhere. It's like the more you're aware of these things and get more familiar with you, the less you're reactive, the less you'll continue to go back to an old behavior or feel like you're not good enough because you continue to experience this shame or this guilt. Once you can get more familiar with these things, then it's an opportunity to actually start working on change. Like, but until you're like aware of what's actually going on internally, like there's no opportunity for change. And so it's
mhm,
just this vicious cycle of, just the countless like turmoil. It's like torture, and that's where like the suffering comes from.
Yeah.
So just not really being in a solution based mentality, but I really don't like to look at it that way as well. It's just like really getting in tune with self.
Thank you for that. That
Yeah.
is probably the most helpful definition because I've asked this question right here on this podcast and to people in my life, and I've never quite totally understood the mindfulness. I understand what the word means, but thank you for that. And then what when you mentioned that the programming is separated by gender, what are the benefits of that? Because I know that's something y'all really make clear.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to take a look at it, but I'll sum it up again. I'm just more simplistic way. It's like we have the fellas in the group, and there might be something I may be struggling with, but I have, the opposite sex over there in the corner, and it's like, I don't think I want to share that. I mean,
Mm.
I already struggle with like, internal things from a personal perspective. It's like I don't want to share it with one person, better
Right.
yet, in the crowd, right? But if I have other men in that group setting and they're demonstrating some vulnerability and things in that nature, it may like encourage me to do so as well because it's all men, right? And even on the female side, it's like there's everybody, operates differently, everybody's affected differently internally, but it's like if you can find some common ground and be given the opportunity to share stuff, it's like it's just so much easier when it's not the same gender. I mean, the opposite genders in those group settings. So I've just like I've watched it. Like I've watched, people shed tears in a group
Mhm.
setting, and the guys or the women, they rally around the person. It's just very it's totally different. It's hard to really explain it, but when there's a lot more similarities in the group than differences, it's just so much easier to like heal in that type of
Mhm.
group setting,
Yeah.
compared to like holding back because it's like I don't feel like
Yeah.
I don't want to be judged, or, you know, they may look at me that way. They already have that mentality, you
Mhm.
know. But when they actually present certain things in that group and just, get that support, it's just so much different compared to like sharing stuff because it's more egotistical
Right.
and
Right.
Showing off.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's more like being dishonest in a
Right.
group setting when it's really not like something that needs to be produced out. It's like you need to be vulnerable in a group setting,
Mhm.
right? Because there's so much deep rooted things that like we really need to start getting out so we can heal. And so if you don't expose it, then it, you may never change.
I and to, compliment Abaya and the way that you guys do IOP. And what I'm about to say also, just a disclaimer, I'm not saying anything negative about other IOPs. It's just, I really appreciate the way that you guys have. It seems to me that you guys um were like, hey, let's try and do this differently. Because I think you can go to an IOP, some are better than others and things
Mhm.
like that. Close around here, across the country, maybe even across the world, a lot of times the footprint just looks very, very similar. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, we have other things like managed care and regulatory bodies that tell us like how long those groups need to be
Right.
in any given day and like what types of services have to be offered. But within that framework that we can't really do anything about, right? It's got
Mhm.
to be 3 hours a day. You
Right.
guys got to meet 3 times a week, like that kind of stuff. It does seem like you guys have really tried to like be as creative as possible. And like you said, providing like the gender specific treatment, incorporating the mindfulness is another thing I really give you guys kudos for because again, I think you see a lot of IOPs or treatment in general to where like, okay, we know mindfulness is good for us, or we're gonna like teach some classes around it. But it seems like you guys have really tried to take that to like a next
Yeah.
level and like making that a cornerstone and a requirement of being in treatment with you guys. Can you I know you have, but maybe speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about being at or working at Abaya is you have to practice mindfulness as well. Excuse me. And so we collectively as a team, actually, we practice it together, you know,
Very
um,
cool.
in a setting to where we're always trying to evolve our mindfulness based practices and things in that nature. And so if we're practicing it, it's easier to like demonstrate it with the clients and help them, find their types of mindfulness based practices that works for them. Um, and like, when you were talking, I was thinking about our scheduling when it comes to IOP because it sort of models like starting your day off on the right track. We have that 8 to 9 virtual um,
Okay.
group. It's part of the 3 hours, but we do 8 to 9 virtually, so they can either be at their home or they can be at the office before they start work, which is what a lot of clients have done in the past. We'll practice some mindfulness and do a type of check in, and so they can prepare their day, and then they come into the office for only 2 hours from 5:30 to 7:30, and they can do a little bit of reviewing, as well as like they can bring like the live like experience they had for that day into the group, and we can actually start addressing those things.
Very cool.
And so plus they get the opportunity to be at home with their families after group compared to being like 9:30 before they get home.
Yeah.
But if they are in school or working, things of that nature, I mean, they have that gap, from 9 to 5, prior to group. So
That's awesome.
That is an awesome idea
Yeah, it really
because
is.
not only do the clients get to start their day off on the right foot with an hour of mindfulness outpatient treatment, and then it eliminates the barrier of, I got to work, I
yeah,
mean, yes, we get it, but any barriers that can be eliminated for people going to treatment are so necessary because, people have valid reasons, but nothing's more important than our mental health.
yeah.
Um, so I also you're part of what you do is coaching, correct?
hmm
Could you sort of explain to us what exactly is recovery coaching versus therapy and just sort of the nuances?
So I like to, recovery coaching is more like someone that's been in recovery for a little while and they have the experience of, they're very compassionate, they're non-judgmental. Like I like to look at it as their guardrails, right? Someone who comes in early in recovery, have no clue about how to navigate through life, don't understand the internal things that's going on. That's why treatment is very important. And just having someone that they can just learn how to build a relationship with. Addiction, it just strains your relationships. It just takes a lot away, along with like the internal piece too. Like, so when you're like coming out of the woods from addiction, it's so difficult to understand how the mind is trying to rewire itself, how all these emotions and these feelings are coming back. And it's like, dude, I can't go to my wife or my brother or whomever. It's like, I'm feeling this type of way. And they supposed to say, oh, I get it.
Right.
Why don't you just, go do this,
Yeah.
breathe a little bit and everything will be okay. It's like, no, they're going to be looking at you like, uh, okay. Right. Reaching out to a recovery coach, outside of the clinical setting, which is very important. Like, I can't call my therapist at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning
Right.
when I'm in crisis or struggling. But I can call my recovery coach and just share honestly, how I'm feeling, and they can relate. And they can like verbatim give them some information based on personal experience on how they've navigated through these struggles, right? And a lot of times you can't do two things at one time. You can't think about like destroying your life with drugs and alcohol again while you're communicating with someone
Mm,
and talking about how you're actually feeling. So we really wanted to give these clients an opportunity, not only to gain a different experience, but like have a shot of not returning to use,
mm.
right? It's like trying to put up another like guardrail, you know, prior to like that return to use experience. It's so easy to do it. And so if we can actually put up as many barriers as possible before they get to that state of using, or if you're utilizing a substance, it's more important than the values that they just talked about yesterday. You know, it's just so important to have these coaches that's in our group settings too, to just to remind them, hey, we just talked about this, 2 days ago, and
Yeah.
this was the type of technique that you like from a breathing perspective. It's like
Right.
let's just practice that right now. get them back centered, and then they can continue to move forward with their life for that day.
Yeah,
That's
that's
awesome.
interesting point about being in the woods because, we walk out into the woods for how many years? In my case, 27.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden have a moment of clarity, which involved, going to treatment and a few other things, but just say, all right, I want to get out of the woods now, you know, but now how do I get out of here?
Right.
I'm ready. I'm starting to walk, but I'm definitely flying blind. Um, and so I guess people in general are encouraged to get sponsors, but we know we need a network, but this is somewhere kind of between clinical and then just the recovery world, who is a real professional, but is also definitely in personal recovery, correct? Is
Right.
that okay?
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah. So we're trying to implement something that they like the experience in, like lack of trust in people, don't truly believe in sponsorship, or really just doesn't understand
Mm.
sponsorship. Uh, don't really understand what networking, you know, looks like or feels like. So we put these clients in a very, and that's the other thing about us. We cap our groups at 8. So we put them in a very small group setting, which is like a network, right? And so they're not truly understanding what the network is until all of a sudden they've building relationships within
Yeah.
that group. They may have a group text, that's going on. So they're already creating a network, right? They don't understand sponsorship, but they have this recovery coach that they've slowly over time started to build a rapport with, right? And then they're like reaping the benefits of like having this recovery coach. Well, they've been experiencing what sponsorship feels like, or mentorship, because we're just giving them opportunities. You could choose a mentor, you can choose whatever the case may be,
Mm.
but we want you to experience it so you'll know exactly what we're talking about, compared to suggesting that you go do this, suggesting that you do that. It's like when you're experiencing it in real time, it's like there's no convincing because you're gaining a positive experience from doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing and needed service because most people I see get sober and enter the world of recovery, no matter what is suggested, people just in general don't know or are afraid to do these things that, it's so easy for me to just say, it's just willingness backed up by action, and not everybody. I mean, people are shy. People have different, like have had a trauma where they're afraid to get random people's phone numbers and
Yeah.
start networking.
Right.
And to have somebody who has been through this, but is also not just another person, in the rooms,
Right.
I think it's an invaluable service. And I wish more people were able to take advantage of it because I see this every day where people come in so beaten down, so raw, but then they just don't make that necessary kind of first leap into getting a network and getting a sponsor. And then, but once that happens, people can get pretty dialed in. But those early days and early recovery, to have somebody really like a Sherpa get them
Mhm.
through that
Yeah,
is an amazing service.
absolutely.
Delvin, if you don't mind, obviously it sounds like you're in personal recovery. You obviously work in the field of
Mhm.
treatment. Do you mind telling us like how did you come about all of this?
Which part?
Well, I guess all of
How'd you
the
do it?
above. How'd you do it?
You talking about personal life, or are you talking about?
Personal to whatever level you feel comfortable
Oh,
disclosing.
Yeah, I
I'll
mean,
tell it
I've
And
everything.
known you for
professional as
years,
well.
heard
Yeah,
bits and pieces. I'd love to hear a mini version of your story.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, just raised by grandparents. Parents were very young when they had me, and so loved unconditionally, man. But what I've learned since I've done a lot of work, it's like I created this narrative of not feeling loved
Mm.
enough, even though I was loved unconditionally. And built this narrative over time, and which created ambivalence. It created like just doing some things that made me uncomfortable because I wasn't raised that way. And over time, just I just participated in the wrong crowd,
Mm.
right? I wanted to fit in. I felt like I was not even the black sheep of the family. I just felt different, and there was a lot of different things that happened over the course of my, childhood, from, not making it to the last tryouts at basketball.
Mm.
And I made a conscious decision not to go because I didn't want to tell my grandfather that, like, I had the last tryouts and I had totally forgot. So I didn't want him to be upset with me. Right. And so I chose not to go. Well, I got cut the next year, playing basketball. And it's like those things really affected me on my journey. And so
Right.
as I've looked back on my like timeline, it's like I've always had this thinking disorder. Like, I'm doing all the projecting, the predicting, the assumptions, and I'm not communicating with anyone but myself, right? So I'm creating this type of, this life in my head, this fantasy in my mind that really just pretty much took me away from things that I probably could have experienced in a much more positive way. And so I was very angry at parents, because I'm comparing myself to other kids and their
Mm.
families and the things that I lacked, whether it's a car at 16 or whatever the case may be. I mean, I stepped out on my own at like 17 because I was just, pissed off at my family, and they were trying to control some shit. Sorry, part of my
You're fine.
French. But long story short, I found substances, and then over time, I started crossing lines in the sand, things that I would never do, because I sold drugs at an early age as well. So I just started doing everything against how I was truly raised, to be. But once I started crossing lines in the sand, and it's so crazy. Like I made this one decision based off of a feeling of, well, I'm gonna show you by
Mm.
using this substance.
Mhm.
And that was the worst decision I made in my life, and it took me 8, 9, 10 years to like really like give up, the thought that I could utilize substances successfully. I mean, I had relied on it for so long.
Right.
I also accepted the fact that I'm just going to exist until I die. Like that's where my addiction took me. But there's a lot of things that happened. I lost everything, kids, place to stay, job, everything that you hear. That was the type of person I have to lose it all before I'm even considering that I actually have a problem. And that's what happened. So I had came into recovery once before, with the ignorance of not understanding what I had in between my ears. And so I ended up going back out, for like 7 months, and I was truly convinced this go around. And so when I came back, I was like, dude, I need to find someone who can just tell me what to do. Like,
Mm.
because ego before is like, I'm just going, all right, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna get all these things back in my life and forgetting about the most important piece, like everything internally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like I'm just focusing on all the external things. This go around, I focus on internal stuff. Like why am I operating the way that I'm operating? Why am I thinking the way that I think? Why do I feel the way that I feel? And so I had someone, and still to this day, he's still teaching me about some of these internal things and how I think and, why I feel this way. And it's like, this is the journey. Like
Yeah.
there's always going to be work to do. But I actually just gave up what I thought that I needed for myself or how to navigate through this process. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know how to live life on life's terms, like on my own. Like that was a very hard pill to swallow. But as soon as I swallowed that pill, I started to feel better. It's like, I need to take my medicine.
There you go.
And the medicine is, Delvin, you don't know how to run your own life,
Mm.
but it's okay. But there are some people who can actually walk with you and help you,
Yeah.
and point things out that you can't see, and I have a design for a living today, and it's not perfect. I make mistakes. I, still do certain things that I don't, feel good about, like hurt people, right?
Sure.
Unintentionally. And it's just things that I have to continuously work on and go back to what we talked about, that structure in the morning. It's like that
Mhm.
structure is so important to me because I need to start utilizing my awareness on when these things starts cropping up a little bit, more so than just like, let's just see what happens type feel. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know.
And then, well, I'm thinking and I don't want to answer this for you, but professionally, it seems like an easy transition, as I think it is for a lot of us who work
Hmm.
in the field. But it sounds like you had somebody or a group of individuals around you that were able to give you that guidance and show you the way. So is now working in the field your way of providing that to other people?
Yeah, it's and that's what makes it feel like it's not work.
There you go. I
When
love that.
when I knew that I could actually get better, it's like I wanted everyone to get it,
Mm,
right? And I've been doing this for a long time, just been over a decade, being in the field and working with young adults and just families and things of that nature. And there a lot of 'em, some of them don't make it, right?
yeah.
But then I'll have this one phone call or this one text message or whatever the case may be. And it's like, Delvin, I really appreciate everything that you've done. It's like, dude, I thought you fell off like years ago. It's like, yeah, I did, but I got back on track. But I mean, that's why I do it.
That's
Like,
great.
it's just a wonderful, I don't feeling to have families just like they get their loved one back.
Yeah.
I mean, a totally different person, which is better than the person that they had before, man. But just like the tears of joy and like, I don't know, it's such a good feeling to
Yeah.
like do the work and just show up for people.
Yeah. I mean, you just mentioned like those phone calls, and it's true. I mean, myself, and also I think a lot of our team as well, is because I think when you're in the trenches and you're doing this work, it's easy if you allow yourself to get sucked into like,
Mhm.
sometimes even like, what are we doing? Because it's tough. I mean, it's a horrible disease, and it takes a lot of people down. And I think it's really easy for us to just be like, to develop this kind of callousness to it and say, question the work that we're doing sometimes. But as you mentioned, those phone calls,
Mhm.
those conversations, right, where it's like it really reminds you, like, no, we're making an impact. People are
Absolutely.
getting better. And it's not only that person, it's their family, it's their coworkers, it's everybody that's
Everyone.
positively impacted by the changes that person makes. And
Yeah.
I'm with you. It helps it not feel like work, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I started working in the field, however many years ago, sort of having this sensation where I felt like I wasn't working, and then I would remind myself that I was, but I actually love it, so it doesn't feel like it.
Hmm.
Because before I got sober, I would have a feeling like I'm not working. It was because I was not working, and I was not at work, and I should have been. But another thing we talked about at the beginning is kind of being needing structure and addicted to the things we do for the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And
Hmm.
this morning before I came in here, I had a reading, which is probably my favorite quote in our literature. We are never cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And I can't control my spiritual condition. I'm not
Right.
sure if y'all can, but I do have control over the maintenance
Right.
Mhm.
and being able to do these things that I do feel like I'm sort of, have transferred my addiction to these things that I do every day, which generally equate to a pretty good disposition and
Hmm.
serenity and peace. But I mean, I definitely get wrapped around the axle, as people would say, in recovery. And when you're talking about awareness, it kind of made me think about a spot inventory, kind of instead of reacting,
Hmm.
kind of taking it all in, taking a pause, the power of the pause, God is in the pause, all of that, and just was trying to reflect before a reaction. What is this? What's happening to me right now? Why am I
Right.
feeling this way? And then if I don't try to do something about it, and I don't mean right there on the spot, but try to work on this
Hmm.
process, then and if I don't do that, then it's just kind of that definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So do you think
Absolutely.
that those things are connected, like that spot inventory and awareness?
Oh man, well, I will share. I've experienced both sides of it. I've experienced when I'm not spot checking, when I'm not utilizing my awareness, when I'm not incorporating spiritual principles, when I'm not taking care of myself, the insanity comes back pretty quickly. And when I am doing my maintenance, and for me personally, I have to take a couple of steps back, and I probably need to communicate more with my sponsor before I like, take the reins and like, I already know what I need to say, or this and that and the third. And it's like, that's where I've fallen short. It's like, all right, I already know the answer or type feel. And next thing you know, I'm just creating more issues. But when I'm like where I'm at right now, I'm in probably the best place that I've been in a very long time. And so I'm going to actually be more out of my own way compared to where I was, months ago. Like I was more in control months ago. I'm giving up control now. And that's how I like to take a look at it. It's like when I wake up in the morning now, I'm giving up control. That means I'm going to do some things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's how
Love
I
that.
look at it compared to I'm in control. It's like, well, I don't really have to do that today. It's like, no, for my own peace of mind, it's like do things that you don't want to do. I mean, it doesn't matter how long I've been around. My brain is still saying you don't have to do that as much. Right. So when I listen to that, I'm not spot checking myself right at that moment. Like I need to do some things in order for me to get out of that mindset. It's very tricky. The longer I've been here, it's like the trickier it gets because things are great. So it's like, oh, well, we don't have to really do as much as we
Right.
normally do right now. So
Yeah.
the spot checking is very important daily, journaling and
Yeah.
things in that nature. And being honest with self, like more importantly. I mean, sometimes I don't even know if I'm being honest with me. And so putting some stuff on paper is very important. Plus, sharing my ideas with other people.
Well, earlier, you were saying about getting my own head and it, basically if I'm the only person I'm consulting about my ridiculous ideas and
Absolutely.
false narratives,
Right.
and if there's anybody who's going to co-sign my bullshit, it's going to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is absolutely crucial that I do run this by people like you or my sponsor or friends in recovery or whatever. They don't have to be,
Right.
but that's a good place to start. Because sometimes I've just heard it said people get these crazy ideas, and the sponsor said, "Is that really true?"
Right.
And we think about it for 1 second, and the answer is probably going to be no.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing you said about, in the morning, waking up in this kind of negative space before you kind of get right, that's what waking up with untreated alcoholism, and the
Exactly.
first thing I do to treat mine is get on my knees and basically ask for help for that day, and then, everybody's got their different routines, but I sure do too,
I just chime in on that because you mentioned the morning routine thing earlier, and that's always something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm a morning person, and I find a lot of I think my overall like health and well-being mentally, spiritually, physically is taking that time in the morning and
Right.
it's become something that's so special and so sacred to me. It's like get up before anybody else is up, whether it's diet and exercise, whether it's taking time for myself, or if it's just like spending some time alone with my own
Mhm.
thoughts. But an interesting thing emerged this weekend, which I think now I need to look at that part of
Uh-oh.
it, is that I think it's become such an important thing to me. I've developed this rigidity around it. And that's
Mhm.
what I noticed this weekend is that, like, hey, while I'm not saying it's not a good thing for me, it's still important.
Right.
I need to also understand that, like, it's not always going to look the same. And I still need to have some flexibility around, like, what that time needs to be spent doing. You know what I
Right.
mean? Does that make
I
sense?
can actually relate.
Yeah.
I've
Is that
had
right?
experience with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's such a great point because I went from having, zero. If there's such thing as negative discipline, I had that.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden I have it's all discipline. And
Yeah.
so I went just a total extreme, one to the other.
Yeah.
And just to your point, I mean, with my girlfriend and her daughter and people if I'm traveling with people and I'm like, nope, I've got to meditate.
Right.
It's like I expect everybody to change
Yep.
their plans to work around my, you know, program of, spiritual maintenance at on every whim I have. And that's just, I need to be, but now I kind of know that I'm going to do it all at this point. It took years
Right.
to finally trust myself enough to know that I'm going to do all the things I do that are my non-negotiables. And it's going to be okay if I don't get to do them in the exact order at the exact time that I want
Right.
to do them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a process.
It's a process, right? And I guess that's maybe, well, I hope one good thing about it all is that you never stop growing. I mean, those opportunities to continue to reflect and do things different and try to just be the best version of ourselves and, have more healthy interactions with the people around us. Like we'll never run out of opportunities to do that differently and better, I guess,
Absolutely
right?
not.
So,
Yeah.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. Well, this has been great.
Yeah.
Oh, man, this is it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Really
You
appreciate
guys
it,
are
man.
awesome.
Delvin, you're the man. Thank you so much for being here. Before we go, just how can people find you?
Well, you can find us abayawellness.com. Also, if you want to do, through email, it can be info@abayawellness.com. And if you just look on the site, there's just a number that you can contact us at and things in that nature. But you also can contact me at 828-337-4916 at
Love
any
that.
given time. So,
Good
That's
man.
perfect.
yeah,
Thank you so much, Delvin.
absolutely.
Thanks, Delvin. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.